විශේෂයෙන්ම අද මේ වැදගත් අවස්ථාවට සහභාගී වන ව්‍යාපාරික ක්ෂේත්‍රයේ මූලිකත්වයෙන් කටයුතු කරන ප්‍රවීණයින් ප්‍රමුඛයින් ඔබ සියලු දෙනාගෙන්ම අවසරයි. ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදී ආණ්ඩුක්‍රම ව්‍යවස්ථාවක් තිබෙන එහෙත් ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදය නැති ලෝකේ ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදී ආණ්ඩුක්‍රම ව්‍යවස්ථාවක් තිබෙන දූෂිතම රාජ්‍ය පාලනයක් තිබෙන රටක ජනවාරි 8 වෙනිදා පැවැත්වෙන ජනාධිපති වර්ණය සඳහායි මම පොදු අපේක්ෂකයා විදිහට විපක්ෂයේ සියලු දෙනාම එක් වී ඉදිරිපත් කළා තිබෙන්නේ. ඒ නිසා අපිට තිබෙන පුළුල් වගකීම සහ කාර්යභාරය පිළිබඳව මුළුමහත් රටේ සහ ජනතාවගේ අනාගතය වෙනුවෙන් ඊටාම වගකීමකින් ඒ කටයුතු ඉෂ්ට කිරීමට අපි පැහැදිලිවම සහතික වෙනවා ප්‍රතිඥා දෙනවා. මේ රටේ ව්‍යාපාරික ක්ෂේත්‍රයේ ව්‍යාපාරික ප්‍රජාවට තිබෙනා වූ බරපතල ප්‍රශ්න රාශියක් පිළිබඳව යම් අවබෝධයක් මා වෙත තිබෙනවා. රජයක් විසින් රටේ ජනතාවගේ නිදහස හා ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදය තහවුරු කරනා වගේම ව්‍යාපාරිකයාගේ නිදහස සහතික කළ යුතු වෙනවා. නමුත් වර්තමාන ආණ්ඩුව ව්‍යාපාරිකයින්ට නිදහසේ කටයුතු කිරීමේ හැකියාව සහ අවස්ථාව දෙන්නේ නැහැ. තමන්ගේ පාලනයට අවශ්‍ය තමන්ගේ කැමැත්තට අවශ්‍ය කටයුතු කරන පිරිස් වලට පමණක් සහන දෙමින් අනික් ව්‍යාපාරිකයින් තලාපෙලා විශේෂයෙන්ම නිදහසේ ව්‍යාපාරික කටයුතු කරන්න ඉන්න නොදී බොහෝ ප්‍රදේශවල අපි දන්නවා කප්පම් ගැනීම බලහත්කාරයෙන් මුදල් ගැනීම පවා මේ ආණ්ඩුවේ පිරිස් විසින් ඉටු කරනු ලබන ඊටාම පහත් ක්‍රියාවක් බව තමුන්නාන්සලා අපි දන්නා වූ කාරණයක්. ඒ නිසා මම විශේෂයෙන්ම අද ඊටාමත්ම වැදගත් වූ වගකීමකින් තමුන්නාන්සලාට පැහැදිලි කරනවා අපි හදන අලුත් ආණ්ඩුව තුල මේ රටේ සියලු ක්ෂේත්‍රවල ව්‍යාපාරිකයින්ට කිසිදු දේශපාලන බලපෑමක් තොරව නිදහසේ ව්‍යාපාරික කටයුතු කිරීමේ අයිතිය අපි තහවුරු කරනවායි කියන එක. ඒ වගේම රජයේ සියලු කටයුතු වලදී ව්‍යාපාරික ක්ෂේත්‍රයට අයත් නීත්‍යානුකූලව නීතිමය පදනමක් තුල ඒ සියලු කටයුතු කෙරෙන්නේ ඉන් බාහිරම කිසිදු ව්‍යාපාරික කටයුත්තක් සඳහා අපි ඉඩ නොතන බව විශේෂයෙන්ම සඳහන් කරන්නට ඕනේ. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a Buddhist country, but even our Hindu, Christian and Muslim brothers all believe in impermanency and change. There is change in every facet of life. The only thing permanent is change. The global free market and other economic theories of the past decade do not hold good anymore. They are not only not permanent, but changing very rapidly. In the recent past, not even the Western countries and Japan have been able to experience long-term growth and sustain it in spite of forecasts by eminent international economics. Today in Europe, even the strongest German economy is not totally stable. Globally, the fast changing economic structure cannot sustain itself. Among BRICS, it is only in China and India there is growth stability. Was there a guru or institution able to predict the downslide of the Russian ruble? Neither OPEC nor any other international oil guru or super economics was able to see or predict the oil price crisis now enjoyed by masses the world over, but stressing and shaking the global economy. It is in these circumstances and background that we have to look at our own economic growth and sustainability. Today, therefore, we welcome all of you to interact, discuss and brainstorm about change for growth and development for employment in Sri Lanka. The Rajapaksa clan adversely blind rushed development of infrastructure. They may have investment in several unwanted white elephant projects and encourage mammoth debates and huge interest, and also rapidly mortgage our future generation. It is true, I and others were also in the cabinet, but these decisions were all made by the Rajapaksa clan high-handedly and bulldozed even without table at cabinet. The poor rural people and even urban people have no use for highways, high-rise buildings, new ports, airports, casino, upmarket nightclub and proscribed drugs. Eminent professionals of our common parties with brilliant track records fear that the economy will soon collapse and up in the ICU of the Treasury Intensive Care Unit. In the last few decades, it shows believe that for the open economy to succeed, grow and prosper, the private sector had to be the engine of growth of the prime mover of the economy. Today, this theory stands filed here in Sri Lanka. For us to promote our policy of growth and development for employment, we believe we need for following four engines. First, the hybrid engine, that is you, the private sector. Second, the petrol engine, that is us and you, the public-private partnership. Third, turbo diesel engine, that is us, the state sector business such as Satosa, Milk Oil Extra. Fourth, the Demo Batta, the NGOs, temples, church, mosques, Kovi, charitable institution and generous benefactors. Most NGOs have for long years contributed meaningfully to raise the standard of our low income or no income rural population. Their work is focused on improvement rural agriculture, health, education and import substitution. They have also trained hundreds of our urban and rural youth in motor and other technologies. The Rajapaksa government not only unfairly and high-handedly grounded most NGOs, but some were even humiliated, family treated and banished. It is well known that NGOs do not pay anything up front. In our government, there will be no political victimization of institutions or individuals, irrespective of party applications. The Rajapaksa government created adverse history in 2011 by taking over the Hilton, Sevanagala Sugar and over 30 other affiliated companies. We will ensure justice for those who were unjustifiably victimized. Action will be taken according to our laws against corrupt public officials, especially those who wields the state in the ugly and unjust exercise whereby Sri Lanka lost aggressively interested substantial investors. This political victimization shocked the business community here and abroad and sent the wrong signal to many foreign and would-be investors. Keen and exploring investors ran away, some putting their plans on hold. The world spread, investment halted. We will honor all international investment protection agreement our government has signed. In our government, foreign investors need not lobby politicians or public officials to invest in or promote projects. The established institution will have power and authority to expeditiously and professionally access and approve without any political or public officials' interference. We have no choice but to adapt to change. We will prioritize growth of small and medium export enterprises and industries. You are clever enough to exploit advantage of all free-trade agreements. You will target in prosperous market of India and the luxury market of China. They will soon become your big export markets. We will definitely reopen for you the links and pathways to our traditionally friends US, Western and Japanese market. President Mahinda says, if we win, we will divide the nations into two. We want to remind him that he has already divided the country into two. The Rajapaksa clan, the super rich, the luxurious masters, drugs, ethanol, stock market, casino, mafia kingpins, comprising less than 0.05% of Sri Lanka. The oppressed and suffering urban and rural masses who can hardly make ends meet, amounting to more than 99.9% of the population. This is how and what happened in Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, Syria, Iraq, Banana Republic, which triggers of the Arab Springs. We are sure, and all of you already know, that we will win this election. Equally, we will continue to be conscious that our political wishes are not unlimited and not extendable. Therefore, within our limited political life, we are determined to serve precisely, honestly and personally for our nation's growth and development for employment. We are with you. Are you with us? Thank you.
To be sure, the government's headline economic numbers are exaggerated, as many serious observers have pointed out. But this masks something more alarming. Post-war growth is debt-fueled and driven by an expanding, inefficient public sector, not by productivity gains. A borrowing spree finances fiscal largeness and increased reliance on volatile international capital markets for debt financing. This is not Ranil Wickremesinghe. Highly interventionist macroeconomic policies favor subsidized and loss-making domestic industries. Trade protectionism has increased. Competitiveness has declined and foreign investment is stagnant. Infrastructure projects have had massive cost overruns. Meanwhile, the defense budget has increased and the military has diverged into business activities. There is widespread perception that benefits of growth have accrued disproportionately to those with privileged political access. The Rajapaksa slant on foreign policy runs directly counter to Sri Lanka's global economic interests. The US and the European Union accounts for 2/3 of Sri Lankan exports. Sri Lanka has everything to gain from close economic relations with India, particularly with the 4 states of the neighboring south that constitutes a market of 300 million people. Now this is what Razin Sali says and what many of us agree with. It's shown by the facts. Today in the Global Competitiveness Index 2013-2014, Sri Lanka is number 65. Good news for you, we have overtaken Rwanda, which is number 66. We were generally better than India, but India is number 60 and China 29. In the World Bank Group Doing Business Index 2014, we are 99. Number you can't forget. This is what we are. It's in this background that a new government under President Maithripala Sirisena, both a 100-day government and a new government that be elected after Parliament, would have to look at the strategy. And one thing new is that the 100-day government, transition government, will be an all-party government. And then we are prepared to give something that you want. After the next elections, the party with the largest power will have the Prime Minister, who will be in charge of government business. And the party that comes second will not have the post for the Leader of the Opposition. I have held that for too long. We'll make him Deputy Prime Minister. Any other party that wants to be in the government is welcome. I think for 2-3 years we have to get down and put the country into order, put the economic policies. What are the issues we have? Immediately, more than you have to think of the people. The cost of living is high, incomes are low. But that's one of the issues that we have to tackle, because there's a slowdown in aggregate demand. That's what's happened to our economy. We have high indirect taxation, high consumer debt, and gold prices have come down. Personal loans, which were 705 billion rupees, are now down to 630 billion rupees. Hire purchase and pawning, which is the highest factor among them, has come down from 335 billion to 200 billion. So this is the background in which we have to operate. There are some people asking, why are you giving 5,000 rupees? How are you going to manage? Well, he promised 3,000, everyone applauded it. We are just giving 2,000 more to make the 5,000. But we have to boost government sector incomes as a means of combating the slowdown in aggregate demand. It's a once it's a one-shot enterprise effort which has to be done. And secondly, we have also come out with certain proposals regarding pawning, because the central bank will have to refinance pawnbroking. Then that way there will be money in the market, the demand will go up, at least by Sinhala New Year time, together with the paddy prices being increased. There is a short-term strategy of kick-starting an economy which has stalled, and which many of you know who are in the retail sector know that things are not moving. So first let's get things moving. That's how we look at the first part of it. What have we got here? We are talking of all this low inflation, low income rate. Do you know that we have we are the lowest revenue growth collection in Asia? We are 5.6% of the GDP. You generally go between 8.5 and 12% of the GDP. Either someone is not paying taxes or not. Then you come back and say, like you're balancing the books by reducing expenditure. So what are you left with? Today we are spending 1.6% of the GDP on education. Others are spending 3.5 to 5. It should be 6. It's so with health. That's our basic investment. Our most valuable resource are our people. We are not investing there. So we are only doing debt servicing. And we are doing debt servicing basically in a scenario where we have a lot of short-term debt. That is the problem that we are having. So let's start tackling the revenue issue. Let's find ways of paying off the short-term debt and getting into long-term debt, taking the long-term, so that there's less pressure on us to start. And then we are looking at the financial sector consolidation. The government says we are not making enough of a return. So let's consolidate everyone, and then we'll have better returns. But it means less jobs, because there's another part of our policy, which is to increase bank lendings and to have more branches and more personal accounts. If everyone has a personal account, then electronic e-government comes in the payment of your taxes, your electricity bill and others. The other, I have a chart here of the bank lending. The bank lending is not going to the small and medium enterprises. Last year, bulk of the bank monies went to the government sector. So obviously, if you are a retailer and you are wondering why things are not moving, why your goods are not selling, because there is no money in the overall economy. And you have the lopsided revenue collection, where you are collecting about 250 from VAT and excise, but only about 200 billion from the income tax. These are fundamental issues that you have to tackle. And we have to get more and more money into the small and medium term sector. So this is why we put some short term policies which a lot of people are questioning us on. As Mr. Maithripala Sirisena said, Honorable Maithripala Sirisena said, we have to look at that 99.9%. They are our consumer base. Without them, none of us can survive. Unless you are Rajapaksa. Secondly, what is our long term? We have to have growth, and we have committed ourselves to 1 million good paying jobs in 5 years' time. We have to go for it. No other way. We want to mobilize the whole country. That's why first get the political parties together. I am sorry, but I say we are not turning our savings into productive investments. This is not only an issue which is confined to Sri Lanka. It also goes to other. But what we need is the next generation of economic reforms which we have not been doing for the last 5 years. You are adding up numbers, the numbers don't add up, and the IMF said last September or something the exchange rate is all right. I don't agree with them. I don't think the majority agrees with them either. They come here and write books and go off. That's why I said I won't waste my time with the jokers here. I'll deal directly with Washington. And that you will see when the government comes in, where we will deal and with whom we will deal. So we have to go in for the second generation of structural reforms, which will promote competition, innovation, and productivity gain. Are you ready for it? Okay. And investments in infrastructure. Everyone is thinking of concrete. No, our first priority is investment in our soft infrastructure. We need people with technology. We haven't got enough people to run IT businesses. We haven't got enough engineers. We haven't got enough mid-level managers. We haven't got enough technicians. How can you start nanotechnology? Have you got 10 people here? How can you go into pharmaceuticals? Then you must think of the salary scales. You have to pay them. But if you have to pay them, you have to pay the workers. They are going to say, look, we also need money. And all of you are asking me, what is this? You want to stop the port city? Look, economic growth today is being driven by mega cities. And our idea in 2002, 2003 was to create a mega city in the whole of Western province. Chennai won't be the largest city. We wanted to make Western province the largest megapolis in the Indian Ocean. At least 30% to one-third of our population live there. We should have come anything from about 8.5 million to about 9 million people. So we got the Singaporeans down and the BOI at that time, the megapolis, we got SESMA down and they gave us the plan. It's not merely infrastructure, it's the economic plan. How do cities drive growth? How did the big megapolises come? If you don't have that, you won't have growth. Just as much as we went for Mahaveli last time, this was the big one. And we worked a plan out. It was not implemented. Things were taken in parts and done here. But that is not megapolis. There was an idea when Fort gets full that we will fill the part of the sea up and develop. That was to be a later stage that came early as the port city. But we have two criteria, which is also in our manifesto. You must pass the environmental, you must have the environment impact report, assessment, and the feasibility study. If no project has that, we will stop that and we will review the whole thing and then decide what has to be done. In the case of the port city, when I asked for the environment impact assessment and the feasibility, the government has so far not given it. They promised, they said there will be a lorry load of it. I am still waiting for the lorry to come. So that will be treated like any other thing, but that's just one part of it. And certainly there was something to do with India around the Independence Square, but we didn't pay much attention, and certainly we didn't have hopper boutiques there for that time. I think the place where we got our independence is more sacred than running a hopper boutique or two. But we have to create this mega city, and the first thing the Singaporeans say, and I agree with it, and we haven't done, going into our infrastructure, water supply and sewerage. We have no sewerage beyond the McDonald's as you enter Kotte. What do you think is going to be in another 5 to 6 years' time? They gave the plan and said, do that first, do the others later, your cost will be low. We have gone and given land everywhere, we have planted, given for buildings. Now the cost for doing that infrastructure will be virtually double. The idea of having some roads, we had to raise the roads and send it in the city, because what they said is you have the highways, you have exit points, but you can't enter into it. And you can see that in Pali at Dematagoda any day. Now you can't do those roads either because you have just gone arbitrary and given away the government lands. So in between there are high-rise buildings. Now how are we going to sort those issues out? But once you have it, the mega city, and we get the mega city going, we get them to revise it, and we'll go ahead with the mega city. It's not 2 billion. At the end of it, you'll have to put about over 200 to 300 billion. And we have a separate vehicle, the Megapolis Development Corporation, which like in the Americans one would have to issue the bonds in the long term. It's a 20-year program, 25, but why not have it? In 2023, we are going to be 75 years of our independence. Show something for ourselves. Show an economy that is working. We wanted higher higher incomes for our people. So the level of technology has to increase. And modernization, agriculture has to be modernized. As you bring people into the cities and create other urban centers in the north, in Kandy. By the way, one thing which I promise we will do is we will give at least 100 factories to Hambantota which are nothing. We will fill the Hambantota harbour with ships and the Mattala airport with airplanes. I must help my friend President Mahinda Rajapaksa after he retires to fulfill his dream. We have to find the markets. And we must get back to our markets, the Western markets, which we require. We must get the GSP Plus from Europe. We'll negotiate that, get the ban restricted on the fisheries products. But one issue I'll have to talk to the private sector is, when you are renegotiating the GSP Plus, do we go to status quo ante, or are we trying to get into the Philippines model? But there have been new developments since the last time we did, so those are issues that has to be dealt with. US, if I can get a concession, we will. It was at that time personal friendship with President Bush that got it. Let me see what we can work out, but a lot of the trends will be seen by about 2016 when the new elections and the new president of America. This Congress is difficult to deal with. It is basically deadlock between the president and the Congress. But we have to start working from now to look at it. And India itself, how to increase our trade relations with India. There are some concerns on our people's side, some justified, some not. I am also I'm concerned really by the non-tariff barriers in India, which I have been taking up. That's also one of the issues. But we have to get into the markets, and to me the biggest market is going to be SAARC and the countries of the Bay of Bengal. I mean, you have India, you have Bangladesh, you have Indonesia, you have Myanmar, you have Pakistan, in addition to the European markets. And if the port in Myanmar is built by the Chinese, certainly you can get it back into the southwest part of China. You've got road access. Getting into the west coast of China is more difficult. The Europeans, the Japanese and the Americans and the Singaporeans are better established. But services will be one sector that we can look at as far as China is concerned. So this is the plan. You want to go ahead. We want to make a start. And with that, Sri Lanka can establish itself. We have always been the best economy in South Asia. The oldest commercial economy, the modern commercial economy in Asia began in Sri Lanka in 1835 when Colebrook Cameron removed the parts of the feudal economy. Why are we lagging behind? I have great confidence in our people. I know they, if given a challenge, they will do it. We did that from 77 and we create an economy which withstood the war. Now let's take on the world and don't be frightened about it and ensure it's better living standards for all of you. And that to do that we need the new political culture, and for that we need Mr. Maithripala, Honorable Maithripala Sirisena as the President of the country. Then of course we'll ask you to do the jobs and we'll sit down.
Sure. Mr. Wickramasinghe might be able to field. How will you address the corruption charges without disrupting business activity and investment?
As far as corruption charges are concerned, we have to decide on the mechanism. The inquiries will go on. If it's about some person or a company, those inquiries will take place. It doesn't mean business gets disrupted. Look at in US. The charges they had, and not only by the courts. Some of the banks, HSBC and others, were brought before Congress. But there was no breakdown. Basically, it's a purifying process, nothing else. And the business will continue, that's all. If you are not made any ungotten, if you have no ill-gained wealth with you, why should you worry? Just carry on with your business. If you have ill-gained wealth, best is go to income tax and pay up it up and sort it out immediately and don't wait for anything else.
Another question, somewhat similar. How will you address the war crimes charges against Sri Lanka?
Actually, we never signed the Rome Convention. It is President Rajapaksa who went before the Human Rights Commission and Council and agreed to investigation. Fortunately, the fact that we haven't signed it means that we can't be taken before the War Crimes Tribunal. But I always feel that it shouldn't be not a matter that has to be taken to a foreign jurisdiction. I never asked for it. The whole thing of international inquiry into Sri Lanka was something which from 1989 President Rajapaksa as a backbench MP advocated. No, I think as far as we are concerned, we should deal with these matters locally through our domestic jurisdiction. But it first requires an independent judiciary. And without independent judiciary, there will always be pressure for international inquiry. Have an independent judiciary, independent cleanse up, ensure the Attorney General's department is independent. Then, of course, go through your domestic process. But there are large numbers involved, and I don't think a country can go through the trauma. I think all parties agreed. So maybe something like a reconciliation and a truth commission, which will go into it, and they may make the recommendation when a prosecution should take place. But in all other instances, there shall be some form of forgiveness and apology. I think the most parties are agreed on the truth and reconciliation approach and how we do it. But we must have an independent judiciary, and then we can stand on our own. The other things, there are other issues where we are not kept up to the human rights standards that I think we can negotiate in Geneva and get back, like our Human Rights Commission coming up to international standards, then getting the ICCPR operative. Those are things that we have to do and we can do.
මෙම ප්‍රශ්නයම අනුර කුමාර දිසානායක මහතාගෙන් මේ ළඟදී සම්මුඛ සාකච්ඡාවක ඇහුවා. ඒ මහත්මයා දුන්න පිළිතුරත් මා මේ අවස්ථාවේදී ප්‍රකාශ කළ යුතුයි. ඒ මහත්මයාගෙන් ඇහුවා දැන් තමුන්වන්සේලා බලයටපත් වුණොත් විරුද්ධ පක්ෂය බලයටපත් වුණොත් මහින්ද රාජපක්ෂ මහත්මයාව විදුලි පුටුවට ගෙනියනවද කියලා. ඒ මහත්මයාගේ උත්තරය වුණේ අපි ඒක කරන්න ඕමනක් නැහැ. දැනටමත් එයාගේම මිනිස්සු එයාව මේ ලයිට් කණුවල එල්ලලා තියෙන්නේ.
මේ රංජිත් එක ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා විදුලි පුටුවට ගෙනියන එක. මොකද විදුලි පුටුවේ හයි කරලා තියෙන නොරිච් වල. ඉතින් විදුලි පුටුවේ වැඩ කරන්නේ නැහැ.
There's another question posed on the same lines. How will you it's not very clear. How will you restore external policy to benefit industry, trade and investment?
If you want to external foreign policy to deal with trade and investment, then you must be friendly with the guys who have the markets. I mean, not for anything else that we kept friendship with the West and went to the extent of getting a free trade agreement, which no one else got, and got the GSP plus. We, as Honorable Maithripala Sirisena has said in his speech, we will restore those relations with the West and with India. And go ahead. We have to remember that all the Asian countries, whether it's India or China, and we are all competing for the Western markets. And our relations with the West has been the longest, longer than even India. And what a lot of people don't realize that in the World War II, it was Sri Lanka that stood by the Allies, not anyone else. And that's something the Americans, British and others haven't forgotten. And our record of democracy. Why are we blowing this up now? I don't know where the foreign ministry is. If anyone can find the foreign ministry, kindly let us know.
Take a ප්‍රශ්නයක් කරු මෛත්‍රීපාල සිරිසේන යොමු කරන්න පුළුවන් නම් අපේ දේශපාලන ක්ෂේත්‍රයේ ද්විතීය නායක පෙළ ප්‍රොවින්ෂල් කවුන්සිල්ස් වල ඉන්න අයගේ වංචා සහගත පුද්ගලයන් බොහෝ දෙනෙක් ඒ දෙවෙනි ලේයර් එකේ ඉන්නයි කියලා ප්‍රශ්නේ සඳහන් කරනවා. ඒ ගැන තමුන්වහන්සේ කටයුතු කරන්නට අදහස් කරන්නේ කොමන විදිහටද කියලා. ඒකෙම
වංචා සහ දූෂණ සම්බන්ධයෙන් ප්‍රොවින්ෂල් කවුන්සිල් වල කියලා හිටන් වෙනම විශේෂයක් නැහැ. පාර්ලිමේන්තුවද, පළාත් සභාවද, පළාත් පාලන ආයතනද, දේශපාලඥයෝ නොවන රාජ්‍ය නිලධාරීන්ද. ඒ කාටත් රටේ තියෙන සාමාන්‍ය පොදු නීතිය යටතේ නීතිය ක්‍රියාත්මක යුතුයි. ඒ කිසිම කෙනෙකුට අපිට සමාවක් දෙන්න පුළුවන් කමක් නැහැ. දිය හැකි ඉහළම දඬුවම් පමුණවනවා අනිවාර්යෙන්ම මේ රටේ දූෂණයෙන් තොර රාජ්‍ය පාලනයක් සඳහා.
ඔබතුමාගේ ප්‍රකාශයේ කාන්තාවන් පිළිබඳ සහ දුවදරුවන් පිළිබඳව තමගේ ප්‍රතිපත්තියත් දූෂණය නැති කිරීමට ගන්න විශේෂ පියවරවල සඳහන් කරන්න කියලා නැවතත් මතක් කරනවා.
කාන්තාවන් සහ දරුවන් පිළිබඳ විශේෂයෙන්ම මව්වරු සහ දරුවන් පිළිබඳව තමයි රටක රාජ්‍ය පාලනය තුළ ඊටාම ප්‍රමුඛතාවය දී යුතු අංශයක්. නමුත් වර්තමාන මහින්ද රාජපක්ෂ පාලනය සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම නොසලකා හැරපු අංශයක්. මේ රටේ සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම සදාචාරය විනාශ වීම සිදු වුණේ ඊටාමත්ම අසීමිත විදිහට පසුගිය කාල සීමාව තුළ. රජයට සම්බන්ධ දේශපාලකයන් ප්‍රාදේශ සභාපතිවරු මන්ත්‍රීවරු පළාත් සභා ඊට ඉහළ අය බරපතල ලෙස ස්ත්‍රී දූෂණ ළමා අපචාර කාන්තා හිංසන බරපතල විදිහට සිදු කළා. කාන්තා කාර්යාංශය සහ ළමා ආරක්ෂක අධිකාරිය යටතේ තිබෙන බලතල කිසිසේත්ම ඒ අයට ක්‍රියාත්මක වුණේ නැහැ. රටේ සාමාන්‍ය නීතිය අධිකරණය ඒ අයට ක්‍රියාත්මක වුණේ නැහැ. එවැනි බරපතල වැරදි කරපු අය සම්බන්ධයෙන් කිසි කෙනෙකුට විරුද්ධව නීතිය ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙලා දඬුවම් දීලත් නැහැ. ඒ නිසා අපි ඉතා පැහැදිලිවම අපි හදන අලුත් අපේ රජය යටතේ අපේ පාලනය යටතේ කාන්තාවන් සහ දරුවන් නැත්නම් මව්වරුන් සහ දරුවන් සඳහා ඔවුන්ගේ සුරක්ෂිතභාවය ඔවුන්ගේ ආරක්ෂාව ඒ වගේම ඔවුන්ගේ පෝෂණය මේ සියලු අංශ සම්බන්ධයෙන් දැනට තිබෙන නීති රීති ශක්තිමත් කරලා කටයුතු කරනවා වගේම අලුත් නීති රීති අපිට අවශ්‍ය නම් ඒ සඳහා හදලා ක්‍රියාත්මක කරනවා විශේෂයෙන්ම මව්වරුන්ගේ සහ දරුවන්ගේ ආරක්ෂාව සම්බන්ධයෙන්.
මම කැමති එකක් මෙතනදී සඳහන් කරන්න. මොකද අද උදේ ගිය අවුරුද්දේ මම පත් කරා විරුද්ධ පක්ෂයේ නායකයා කොමිසමක් කාන්තා හා දැරියන්ගේ හිංසනය පිළිබඳව. ඒ වාර්තාවද බාර දුන්න අපිට. ඒක පාර්ලිමේන්තු ඉදිරිපත් කන්දෙනුවේ රෝසි සේනායක මන්ත්‍රීතුමා කරු ජයසූරිය මහත්මයාත් හිටියා. එතන කියන්නේ මේවා ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන යන්ත්‍රණය උමනා කියලා. මෙතුමා කිව්ව එක හරි. දැන් මෙතන කියලා තියෙන්නේ ගිය අවුරුද්දේ ස්ත්‍රී දූෂණය ගැන පැමිණිලි 2700ක් තියෙනවා. නඩු දාලා තියෙනවා 7කට.
අනිත් එක
මහින්ද චින්තනය
කාන්තා කාර්යාංශය සහ ළමා ආරක්ෂක අධිකාරියේ සභාපති වෘත්තියට හැම වෙලෙම පත් කරන්නේ දේශපාලන පත්වීමක්. දේශපාලන හිතවත්කමක් තියෙන කෙනෙක් තමයි මේ දෙකේම සභාපති විදියට පත් කරන්නේ. නමුත් මගේ අදහස නම් ඒක දේශපාලන පත්වීමක් නොවිය යුතුයි. ඒක අධිකරණ බලතල තිබෙන ඒ කියන්නේ විශේෂයෙන්ම අඩුතරමින් විශ්‍රාමික විනිශ්චයකාරවරුවත් ඒවැ සභාපතිවරු සඳහා පත් කළ යුතුයි. එහෙම නැතුව ඒ ආයතන අපක්ෂපාතී වෙන්නේ නැහැ. දේශපාලකකින් නැත්නම් තිබෙන රජයේ බලපෑම් වලට යටත් වෙනවා ඇමතිවරු විසින් එහෙම නැත්නම් ජනාධිපති විසින් එවැනි තනතුරු වලට පත් කරපුවාම. ඒ නිසා එවැනි පත්වීම් අපක්ෂපාතී මධ්‍යස්ථ පත්වීම් විය යුතුයි. එයාට සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම ස්වාධීනත්වයේ තියෙන්න ඕනේ ඒ බලතල ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න.